I want to welcome you all to Real Talk Those Six. It's an opportunity for us to open our newsroom up to the community. I just wanted to know who's been here before. Oh, great. That's terrific. Thank you so much. Welcome back. Thank you for coming out again. We're glad to see you. For those of you who aren't familiar with The Real News, The Real News is a nonprofit news organization, which means we do not receive any money from the government. We do not receive any money from corporate sponsors. In fact, we rely on individuals like you. Tracy handed out some white envelopes earlier. If any of you feel inspired to donate, any contribution is welcome and truly appreciated. Or you can go to therealnews.com later on tonight and hit that big yellow donate button. So tonight is Real Talk, though, which is an opportunity for us to open up our newsroom to the community because your feedback's really important to us. We want to know what stories matter to you, what stories you care about. And we also want to give you an opportunity to talk about your concerns and hopefully some solutions to some of the problems plaguing our city. I want to remind you to be generous with your wait staff. And I'm going to turn things over to our executive producer, Eddie Conway. He's the host of Rattling the Bars, and he is a force to be reckoned with at the Real News Network, and we all appreciate him. We're going to show a video package first, then we're going to have a panel discussion, and then we're going to give you, the audience, an opportunity to speak with our guests, and I'll be coming around with a microphone to facilitate that. So let me turn things over to Eddie, and thank you so much for coming out tonight.
Yeah, again, thank you. We've done like 5 of these programs. It is being televised. And I guess the only thing that I would ask people to do is be concise with your questions. Or if you got comments and no questions, keep them down to about 2 minutes at least. That way other people have a chance to get their ideas and their voices out there. Memorial Day down at the Inner Harbor, a lot of young people went down there. Memorial Day last year at the Inner Harbor, a lot of people went down there. One of the things that came out of that was a terror kind of report from mainstream television that young people were down there and they were acting like criminals or they were acting like thugs. I looked at Jack Young, the acting mayor right now. He came out with something similar saying, why don't the parents talk to the children? Back when Freddie Gray was killed and there was an uprising, the mayor came out, Stephanie Rowland Blakes, the president, Obama, came out and labeled the youth as thugs. And so this concerns me and this concerns all of us because a few people might act like we don't want them to act, and then everybody is labeled the same way. And it seems that when you approach a public area in which we pay for and we built, we gave tips to people to build that Inner Harbor. It's our space. Our youth should be in there, and they shouldn't be viewed as criminals the moment they walk down there 3, 4, 5, or 10. So tonight we're gonna look at that. We're gonna talk about that. And we put together a panel of experts and maybe not so experts. Young people have grown up and they have experienced what we are seeing. So they have a voice in this and we're gonna give them a voice. So to my immediate right is Dee Watkins. He's an author, but he's also a professor. But if he looks like he's tired, it's that he's done visit 3 high schools today, talking to young people. All right? To his right is an algebra youth project leader, Katie Aviola. Did I do that right? Okay, give me, say it.
It's Katie Arevalo.
Okay, Arevalo. I'm bad with names. That's bad. Um, and to her right is Elijah Robbins, and he's a senior youth student and leader, and from the Intersect. And last but not least, joining us is Ivan Robbins. He's also from the Algebra Project. And so we're gonna hear the voices of the youth. We're gonna get a chance to talk to them, find out what they want. And fortunately for us, we had a number of young people joined us here today, so we'll have some questions that's concerns for them also. So I want to start off really, and I want to ask the whole panel, and we can just go down the road and answer this however you want to. Why do you think our leaders, our mayors, our police chief, our presidents are labeling or putting those kind of labels on young people every time there's some sort of minor incident? Why do you think that's happening?
All right, this one, all right, back. So me personally, I believe there's a disconnect. So when these minor incidents happen, there's a cause. And before looking at the cause of the root problem, we just look like, oh, this happened, a fight broke out. But what made the fight broke out? There's usually a stem root that we never look into, and it's just like these young thugs, these problems, these delinquents. So
Ivan, I have just been corrected. Can you hold that thought? No, it's not your bad, it's my bad. I need to show the video first. and that's why we have producers, because I don't know what's going on half the time.
Good evening, I'm Max McGee.
And I'm Ava Joy Burnett. We are following breaking news tonight at the Inner Harbor, where multiple people are under arrest following a massive disturbance.
Fights, teens on top of cars, and thefts is how witnesses and city officials describe the scene.
Well, Vic, witnesses say it was complete chaos here. Hundreds of people were seen running around. Fights were breaking out in that crowd of people. City officials say the mayhem needs to stop.
Well, really, is a parenting question. Are the parents talking to their young people to let them know that downtown belongs to you too, the Inner Harbor belongs to you too, but you go there and act with common sense and decency and not go down there to disrupt and fight.
Over Memorial Day weekend, 6 were arrested for fighting at the Inner Harbor. While many focused on the actions of young people, others said the incident should be a teachable moment for adults with power in the city.
The mere presence of teenagers will elicit some sort of response from the police department. And so you need to ask yourself, what are the kids reacting to? Are the kids reacting to the police? Because the police could be causing the problem.
Responding to the incident, the Baltimore City Police Union tweeted, quote, "To our officers at the harbor tonight, protect each other and don't fall into the trap that they are only kids. Some are criminals." But former Baltimore police officer Larry Smith said that message only serves to criminalize Baltimore youth.
The FOP union is already sort of putting a target on these kids. So any interaction that they have, a cop's mindset is, well, they could be a criminal. So it's already going to start off as a negative interaction. And a lot of this language is just being substituted for language like back in the 80s and 90s. Like if you look at the Central Park 5 case in New York, like the big terminology back then was wilding. Teenagers were wilding. Now in Baltimore, you have mainstream media, politicians, and the FOP using terms like flooding the harbor, creating chaos.
When young people do speak out about the conditions they face, they rarely get the same kind of attention.
We're trapped and we're afraid and we're hurting. And we wanted justice. We wanted to be heard.
The violence is definitely caused by unnecessary laws and poverty because people trying to like if you don't have nothing else to do, you're gonna resort to selling drugs, and as a result of selling drugs, he's gonna get into arguments and fights and stuff. And like, yeah, it's definitely gonna like if they had a chance, I feel as though like the government is trying to keep the minorities oppressed, like they're trying to keep us down.
And I just want to say, I'm afraid to go to school in the morning because I might get shot. Like, you shouldn't be scared to go to school because you might get killed. You're scared to go learn, which is so supposed to be fun.
Baltimore schools just honored the 12 students who died over the past school year.
Last year, at this time, we mourned the loss of 9 students to violence on the streets of our city. And it seems inconceivable that anything at that time could have been worse. But tragically, in the current school year, we have lost 12 more of our young people to violence. And so, unfortunately, the violence has continued to take our youngest members.
Studies have shown the longer you grow up in Baltimore as a youth, you're expected to earn less money throughout your life. Over the past 2 decades, the city has cut rec centers while massively increasing funding for police. Meanwhile, the school system continues to be underfunded on a huge level, at least $250 million a year, according to state commission studies.
We've had multiple times where the ceiling has fallen down, where there's been holes in the walls, where it's harder to get rid of the rats in the basement and everything, and it's hard to heat and cool the building because of how large it is.
That's why youth like 18-year-old Deshauna Bryant are going to the courts to get more funding, with the help of the ACLU of Maryland and the NAACP Legal Defense Fund.
Everyone wants to judge us, how they don't think we're the best students, how we're not up there in test scores and everything, but we can't have the best test scores, we can't be the best students if we're not put in the proper environment. If we have to leave every single time it's cold, if the building has to be let out, or if we have to leave every time it's too hot to stay in the building, or if our teachers don't have enough materials to teach us the proper things, it makes it hard to be these students that everybody wants us to live up to be.
A growing number of scholars argue poverty was created by policies like segregation, redlining, and exploitative housing practices. A recent study found $3.2 billion in wealth was plundered from black homeowners in Chicago in the 1950s and 60s. This was the same time the government subsidized the creation of the white middle class in the suburbs. The question now is, what are the people prepared to do to remedy this problem that is at the root of so many of Baltimore's issues? For The Real News, this is Jessel Noor.
Okay, to go back to the original question, why is officials labeling youth like that? And Ivan, can you start over again and give it a shot?
So I was saying there's a disconnect. So like, as Baltimore youth, we face all these issues and all these traumas, but like, none of these city officials besides like Zeke actually comes out and be like, hey, let me talk to you. How can I help? Or like, what can I do? So like, when these big incidents happen, it's never looked at as like, this was the root cause or this stemmed from that. It's just more so, all right, this happened. Now you're a thug, now you're a delinquent. And now we have to put these policies in place to counteract that so we can make sure that doesn't happen again, rather than retracing the steps from the very beginning, the root problem, like I was saying before.
So, kind of to, I guess, piggyback off of what he just said, I think there is a misunderstanding between the youth and these officers and whoever else are criminalizing youth. I think that we need to hear more from the youth, like during these incidents, like the one during like a week ago, something like that. I believe, we need to hear the voices of youth. We need to, the news reporters or whoever, they need to go down there and maybe speak to some of the youth who are there, like in the incident, or who are near the incident or knew more about the incident, rather than hearing from these reporters who criminalize the youth.
So I personally think they know exactly what they do. I think officials know about how they play a role in being assets of improper allocation of funding, I think that they know that they've been screwing over schools, and I think that they need someone to pin as the bad guy. Historically, if we look at all kinds of injustice that the US and its policies have done, they've always known exactly what they've been doing, but when things go south, they need someone to blame. And so they begin to point fingers and call people thugs and call people unrowdy and call them out of their place, or they begin to blame parents and say that parents aren't doing their job teaching kids, quote, that the Inner Harbor downtown is theirs. If we're being realistic, the downtown doesn't feel like it's ours to any young person who went through Baltimore City schools or is in Baltimore City schools. And so if I talk about what I know about immigration. So I'm gonna kind of draw a parallel here. For me, it's kind of like when the US funneled $1 million daily to El Salvador, and then ended up creating the situation where gangs came out of. And then when those gangs come here to the US, and when the immigrants are fleeing to the US, instead of being refugees out of the pockets of the US, we're illegal aliens. And so the US always knows, the government always knows, policymakers on local levels always know what they're doing, and they always know that they're to blame, but instead of having a discussion about holding themselves accountable, it's just really easy to just point a finger. So I think that's what they're doing here. And in this case, the people falling victim to it are people, young people who are victims of poor funding, poor, very inadequate allocation of funding, because it's not like the money's not there. And so I think it's just them pointing their fingers at young people, honestly.
I was in North Carolina the last time Duke won the Final Four. It was right by campus. I saw a group of white dudes flip over a minivan. I don't know what they were smoking, but they flipped over a minivan, like a whole minivan, like they flipped it over, right? So if you send out a bunch of police officers into the middle of a situation like that, you can easily send people to jail, right? Now you just saw this dude said it was hundreds of kids down there and only 6 got locked up. So if everybody's fighting and everybody's out of control, how do you lock up 6 people? I think the bigger problem is something that we should focus on is, one, black children don't get to be children. You get treated like an adult as soon as you walk in the room. I think about the Stanford case and that guy Brock Turner, who was raping like it was legal, and the judge said he's a good kid. We don't want to ruin his life. This dude is a rapist who was caught being a rapist. And you talking about saving his life, even though he's ruining the lives of other people. And that's the problem. We have to go through 2 different systems and adhere to 2 different sets of rules, and it's not a fair thing. And another point that I wanted to make is just this whole idea of kids not getting to be kids, and how some of these I'm not gonna name names, but some of these politicians, some of these business owners, some of these people out here in media who are controlling this narrative are fake heroes. And for fake heroes to be successful, you need fake villains. So they're turning these kids into villains and demonizing them to not only sustain capitalism and allow social reproduction to exist, but they're trying to elevate themselves and make them look like they're more than what they are, and they're the actual crooks.
You know, I wonder, there's a lot of questions that I have, but I wonder what impact this has on young people. And I wonder how they see older people in the community acting toward them, and how they see these officials acting toward them. How does that impact them? I think you touched on it a little bit, but I want to start back again with you. You're it. How does that impact you, that collective criminalization?
I mean, automatically you feel like a target. Like, I go to an early college, and every time something happens at that early college, police get called, we gotta go through this whole long process. It's like, yo, I'm never gonna have that opportunity. Like D. Watkins was saying earlier, I'm never gonna have that opportunity to be a kid. I go downtown and it's 4 police officers just following me just because. I'm everywhere I go, I have a target on my back, and it's just yo, I don't want to go nowhere no more. It's just it kind of hurts because you become institutionalized. That's just normal to you. Every day, every hour, you just feel this whole sense of Is it like something wrong with me? Is it like something I did? And in entirety, it's nothing you have done. It's just systems in place that's giving you that idea. And it's just like, it's nothing. You feel like it's nothing you can do about it. And that's why like we have these moments where everybody just feel like so defeated, like so angry, but they just don't know they have power to do actual things.
Okay, so I think it kind of, well, for me, I feel like, because I do experience walking into stores, cops, eyeballing me, or they just, be, like acting suspicious, and it kind of makes it feel like I'm a threat to someone, where I'm just trying to, buy Gatorade or something like that. It dehumanizes me, and also I think for the kids who out there who like weren't raised like I was raised, properly, with a certain etiquette or just a mindset. I think that it kind of, they become accustomed to hearing that, and then I feel like it reflects in their behavior. I think it kind of causes these kids to act that way because they're being fed it all their lives. So I think that's extremely like impactful.
I think we largely underestimate the importance of making sure that spaces feel like they belong to young people. So I know, and just real quick to check what a young person-led space means, because I know a lot of people say young people lead a space, and it looks like young people getting to speak once. But no, young people leading a space looks like young people making the ultimate decision without the input of adults, without the input of people. So like at BAP, that looks like putting an age limit on who gets to vote, be it budget matters, be it whatever. So like if you're older than 25, you can't vote. And so I think when we think about communities or when we think about schools, we should also have a similar mindset. The young people have to be ultimately in control of their spaces. And so I think a lot about the young lady who talks about like the testing. And I think that oftentimes students are putting in a 95% energy just to make the space feel enough theirs to do anything. And then the other 5% is meant for them to be in perfection, which is just not gonna happen. So I think that if we're gonna think about what it looks like for young people to hold space and for young people to move through space in a way that is comfortable for them and also in a way that doesn't create tension between them and authority figures, I think we have to think about what it looks like for young people to control those spaces. And so I think anybody can relate to this. If someone is controlling the way that you maneuver in a space, are you gonna feel comfortable with them? I think any of us can say no, right? And so if you're not gonna feel comfortable, the same thing happens with young people. The same thing happens with students of color. They're not gonna feel comfortable if their every move is monitored, if their every move has an eye on it. So I think, of course, young people aren't gonna feel comfortable with police. Of course, young people aren't gonna feel, specifically young people of color, aren't gonna feel comfortable with authority figures who, one, don't come from where they come from, and then two, attempt to create spaces that work for them from their point of views. And so like if young people can't maneuver in those spaces, I promise you there will be tension. And I think that's where a lot of the frustration that happens between young people and authority figures comes from. But yeah, so that's why I think that it's important to not think about why young people have a bad relationship with authority figures. I think we need to think about how these authority figures are taking a space that's supposed to belong to young people.
I think that what happened at the Inner Harbor is just an example of what has been going on for a long time. People in power in this city, they don't want that space to be for young people. It's a tourist spot for like businessmen. You know, you out of town and, you know, before people said, are you from Baltimore? Is the wire real? They used to say, I've been to Baltimore, it's great. I love the Inner Harbor, right? That's where they get their tourist money from. And it was never a space that was meant to be heavily occupied by Black people anyway. But Baltimore has a really, really, really strong history of segregation. Like we're like pioneers when it comes to being racist in this city. Roland Park was the first neighborhood in America that was built for white people. In the country, the first all-white neighborhood is Roland Park. So it's like, it's not a brand new thing. I think we need to, so one, you know, and it's crazy because I think, you know, when I was a kid, like, it was never a reason for me to go to the Inner Harbor. Like it was like better stuff for me to do. Like I Like, want them to go to the fudgery, you know? Like, little slice of diabetes. Nah, so, you know, it wasn't like a thing for me to do, but I think about racism and I think about how this city is keeping that history of segregation alive. That's why they did so much reporting and so much over policing to make it look like such a bad thing, just so everyone can be alarmed and we can keep them out of that area because that's our tourist money. And that's what we want that to be for. The guy who hangs around the Inner Harbor, you see him walking with he has a blazer and he has like jeans on and like church shoes and he's like on a business trip cheating on his wife. That's what the Inner Harbor's for.
Oh, you finished?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we can see the problem. What do we need to do? What is it that young people need that will help them succeed and kind of like push back? And I think the young lady here kind of like touched on it about controlling your own space and controlling how you organize and having that voice and having the resources to follow up. But I'm gonna put that question to everybody and we're gonna start down there. And Katie, if you wanna, you can add something additional okay, so go ahead.
Similar to like what Katie was saying earlier, we need the youth in positions of power. So like at the Algebra Project, anybody under 25, like Katie was saying, can vote, but as soon as you hit 25, you can't vote. But those people that's 25 and older, they have to play like supporting role or like guidance for those people, for those youth in positions of power. So like if I'm making a decision, like even though Katie is under 25, Katie won't tell me no. Katie will try to support that decision, make sure I have all the means to make that decision. So like all the information, all the tools, and those things necessary so that I can enact on that. So like things like that is important. So like the Algebra Project, one of the main things we do is like collaborate with a bunch of youth orgs. So our biggest thing is like a homeless event. We just did that recently, and like with that, we come together and have like projects. Projects enables you to have enable you to have a direct action in somebody else's life. So positions of powers like that is a clear example of doing that. And that's just like an example.
Yeah, so I think like not only allowing youth to, get in their own, not only giving youth power, letting their voices be heard, I think like starting them at a younger age, getting them comfortable with having a voice that's valued or a voice that's being paid attention to. I think just to get them in that atmosphere, get them used to that feel, so maybe they can grow up, join these programs, and hopefully there's more other programs and opportunities for these children as well, so we can hear more from the youth as well. Yeah. Okay.
I've always been firm, and it's probably because I've been around BAP since I was really young, or younger. But I've been a firm believer that once you move through systems, you stop being the most adequate person to talk about them. And so I think right now we aren't going to come up with some big solution that works for the entire city. But I think that if we at least leave with small lessons, that it's worth something. And so something that I've had to learn in BAP is that you have to, unfortunately, we live in a capitalistic society that teaches us that we always have to aim for power. But I think we have to start getting really and extremely comfortable with understanding what it means to give up power, specifically to younger people, younger students of color. And so for me, I think he just touched on it a little bit, but for me, as soon as I was out of high school, all my 4 years with BAP in high school meant heavy organizing. And so as soon as I stepped out, it did feel a little weird having to be like, you're not the one that can talk about this anymore. And that's because we have to have this understanding that our high schools, our schools, our systems, they're fluid. And so while the basis of them, which is racism, is extremely constant, they're always moving, they're always changing. And so I'm no longer the person who can talk about the experience of high school in the way that someone like Ivan can. So like when we talk about this, if this happened 3 years ago, I would have been Key. I'm no longer Key. Key right now is Ivan. Key right now is John. Key right now is Elijah. And so I think that it's extremely important that when we think about organizing, if you have forms of organizing, if you have forms or sets of power, that you hand them over to the people who are in the position of experience. Because I think experience is that one key factor. So like the solution that we come up with right now is not going to be the solution that works 5 years from now. It just won't be. In some ways it may, in some ways it may not. And so if we always have a fluid system in which we're constantly handing over power to people in high schools, to people in middle schools, to people, to students in college when we're talking about campuses, then I think that pushes us in a direction where we're at least always moving towards solutions that work for us now. And so I don't think that there's like one big answer as to how to find one massive solution that works for everything. I think it's about constant organizing. And so the one key, in my opinion, the one key thing to making sure that organizing is always happening in the right way is ensuring that young people are always at the front of that organizing, which means people like us in this room have to start giving up power.
So a couple of things. One, we need to stop saying things like we need more police. That's not true. That doesn't work. We need to stop saying things like money is the answer, because the richest people in the world just got like a $1.5 billion tax cut, and they still racist and they still greedy. And we need to stop saying things like, we got to talk to the parents, because these things, they don't work. Like, they don't work. We say the same things over and over and over again, and we get zero results. The real monster, the big problem, is systemic poverty. So until we attack that, we're always going to have the same problems over and over and over again. And if you live in this city and you love this city and you support a person that's a part of this failed, corrupt, I owe a person a favor, or I owe this and that person a favor power structure, then you're part of the problem too. So don't ask me nothing about it.
Okay, just before I open up for questions, answers, I've been noticing something, and I've been thinking about it, is that these labels affect adults too. It affects how we see our youth. It affects how we see people when we walk down the street. And I think it's important to understand we can't change a lot of the culture, especially the culture on the street corners, where people might have to hustle to get food, to pay rent, to take care of their children or whatever. They put themselves at risk. We can't change that at this point without finding a way to get resources to those people, but we can change how we see them when we're walking down the street. We can change our interaction one-on-one. We can start being civil. We can start saying, hey, how you doing? We can engage to some degree to let people know that they're not alone, they're not isolated. There's a possibility of a way out of this trap that they're stuck in. And I just want to make that clear, because I know adults have a big role to play, not just in giving young people space, but start to treat young people like young people again, and don't treat them as our adversaries. Don't treat them like all these labels that presidents and mayors and police chiefs put on them, because those labels impact how we deal with them, and then in turn, they deal with us from the way we deal with them. So we have to keep that in mind all the time. So to open up the question, there's actually a young lady that was in the Inner Harbor at the time. Taya, can you bring the mic up here and give this young lady an opportunity to share with what she witnessed? She was there, okay?
Oh, sure. Thank you very much. I was itching in my seat and itching to say this. So I was at the harbor that day. Me and my friend were there because I was taking graduation pictures. We were there, I think, at like 3:00 p.m. And there were already hundreds of people already there, walking around. White people, black people, young, old. There was there was a Indian parade that was going on the next day. They were already there. So me and my friend were like, let's go to Chick-fil-A and get something to eat. Now, there were a lot of youth in there, but they were actually being very kind and very respectful, opening the doors. And yes, you know, you can get in front of me. And when we came out, we went to Barnes and Nobles. We sat on like the 3rd floor balcony. And then we noticed all these helicopters flying around and helicopters and, you know, the paddy wagons. And we're like, well, why don't we see them putting anybody in them? We watched them circle around these buildings, y'all. I'm telling you all what the facts are. They were not putting them in there. They were wasting resources, blocking traffic, which caused more people to pack down there. And they were putting people like, sorry about that, they were shifting people together, right? So when me and my father were like, it was like 14 and 15-year-old girls, I'm looking at some, that came up, black girls, and they came on the balcony and they were saying, we don't want to be a part of the problem. We know that the police are targeting us. And I said, me and my friend were cracking jokes like, you know, the news is going to have a field day with this. And we were like, I wish they would talk with them. And so when we were about to leave to go in the car with my father, the tactical forces of police were coming our way. So I felt targeted. So y'all see aerial shots of them pushing us together too, right? I'm 31 years old. They're going to say that I was out there doing whatever. So it was a small group of whatever. But I have a lot to say, but I'm just saying to you all to say, I'm glad that some of you all had hit on the points that I've already mentioned. Downtown is not for black people. I stayed down there last year. They found everything they could to kick me out of their hotels. And also, you know, slaves were docked downtown. So yes, the history, y'all mentioned that. But I just wanted to say thank you all for this. Maybe one day I can be on a panel and I'll share more. I'll do a part 2 of my own somewhere and y'all can come out. Because I want to continue, to talk about this. But thank you all so much for letting me share my perspective. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So the floor is open up for questions to anybody on the panel. Okay, one hand. Well, okay, you. But then are you one of the youth? Okay. But go ahead with your question, and then I want to kind of like let the youth have some say.
So I am not a youth, but I do teach the youth. Ivan and his brother are two of my students. Okay. And I just have a quick comment. It strikes me that at the highest levels of our city government, there are short-term memories that cause long-term problems, because this throwing around of this word thug is a problem. Because if we remember very distinctly, just over 4 years ago, Mayor Rawlings Blake used the word thug to describe students of Frederick Douglass High School who got in a confrontation with police when they were simply trying to get on the train or on the buses of Endowment to go back home. Right? So I would ask our friends at the city council level to maybe remind our current mayor that caused a big stir back then, and maybe we should remind him that such words are very divisive, that they are very stigmatizing, and we probably should not use them because they are indicative of the ways that we target our youth. Number 2, as a teacher, I do all I can to empower our youth to stand up to these kinds of injustices. So I am making a pledge to stand in front of these students and empower them to take on these issues when they cannot, and train them so they can take on these problems in the future. And so should we all.
Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, there's questions over on this side first and then down row. Okay. I want to let some of the young people ask the questions first, but I will get to you and everybody else that I can.
So, like you offered a lot of the issues that are presented in regards to the youth. So what would be like possible solutions? Because I noticed one of the youth on the panel is right, communication is a huge is a huge problem between adults and the youth. I think that we should change the language that we use with our youth in order for them to comprehend some of the subject matter that happens around us. But my question is, like, what do you believe are possible solutions to protect our youth and help them organize when they're fully aware that this is intentional?
Somebody on the panel want to answer that? Anybody?
Something we do at the Algebra Project and something we done with the O-Ray Civic Engagement class is actually analyzing the issue. So before we can make an act on like the change or anything on it, you have to understand the history behind it. So for me, that's number one. So like we talk about redlining in Baltimore, but one of the first beginnings of redlining in Baltimore was like the projects. So like things like that is where we start at. Then we go on to how it acts on the current day society. Then we look at like policies that either support or what's the other word? Disagree with those or counteract those policies. Then we move on top of that and see our constituents, our partners, our allies, any opponents and things like that. And then we formulate a plan. So that's something that another organization I work for called No Boundaries we do, called a strategy chart, and we fill that out. Then we move on to actually doing the campaign.
And this becomes really frustrating when like you're a young person because you want to hear a solution that sounds like I can go out and do that right now. And so unfortunately, the cause behind the frustration and the tension that exists between authority figures and schools and young people and communities and young people stems so deep that it requires a whole set of like infinite solutions. And so it looks like them stopping the kind of language that they use, but but then it also sounds a lot like us. It sounds a lot like solutions in school. So like, how do we change the kinds of curriculums that we use? How do we begin to teach history that's related and relative to us, right? It looks like, how do we put teachers in our schools that look like us? It sounds like, and so those little mini solutions go on. And so that's why I think that organizing is key. I think that organizing is our solution. It's kind of like if we think about this as one big picture that kind of just has to keep moving in, right? And so on the big level, it has to be organizing. And so I think a better question is, how do we create structures that allow students to organize? And so to me, that looks a lot like us going out and being a lot more public, a lot more vocal about the way in which schools get funded, a lot about the way in which our recreation centers get started back up and funded, because I think that could look like a good alternative through which students could organize. How do we begin to fund nonprofit organizations that are already doing organizing that are not currently getting funded? How do we begin? So I think a lot of it looks like us moving out when it comes time for budgets, when it comes time for new policies, when it comes time for us to talk about the kind of resources that we can put into schools and into young people. And I think then we can start pushing for what that organizing looks like. But so I think right now there's a bigger conversation about how we create spaces where students can organize in the first place. Because I think through that organizing, the little small solutions will begin to come about. A small organizing group can make a whole change of curriculum in Baltimore City schools, while another small organizing group is working on the kinds of language that we allow older people to use when talking about us. And so if we have different pockets of organizing, I think we begin to make change on a bigger level over time. But I think right now it looks like, how do we create space for people to organize in the first place?
Let me add to that, because the sister is from the Algebra Project, which is right next door, right upstairs. And there's space in which you can join them and become part of that organizing as young people. But in addition to that, the Real News has a commitment to make space available for any young people. And we did this at our last presentation, and people actually took advantage of it, and they used that space, and they brought together a bunch of other people that wanted to organize. We're committing to making that space available now to young people. If you want to organize, if you need the space, then get in touch with Jessel, get in touch with me. Just holler at somebody in the Real News. That space is available. You can organize. It'll be your space because there will be no adults in there. And you can come in there and organize and figure this out. Or even you can work with the Algebra Project, or you can even ask the Algebra Project to give you some guidance and some leadership. But the space is available. I just want to make that clear for anybody that wants to organize and move beyond that. So did you see other hands up? Okay, go ahead.
Good evening. So I'm gonna preface my comment with this. I run a development corporation in Park Heights. And I grew up in some of the worst neighborhoods in the city, Murphy Homes, Lexington Terrace, Sandtown, and Park Heights. So I think that at some point we have to have an honest conversation. There are some bad children out here, okay? That's true. How they got there is some of our fault, okay? That's how they got there. That's a parenting thing, that's part of our fault. But I think that some of the children that we see and some that we don't see, right? Because the good kids, a lot of the good kids are in this room. But the kids that I encounter at Park Heights and Belvedere are not in this room. And so it's a different, they're different children. So when they call some young people animals and criminals and things like that, they're wrong for that. But we can't condone bad behavior either. We can't also say that all children are bad, but we can't condone bad behavior. So from a young person, and I say this because I'm a father, I have 4 young Black men out here in Baltimore. I have 12 grandchildren that are growing up in the city. So we have to get to a point where there is a disconnect between the younger population and the older population. And somebody asked me today, how do you engage young people? And you know what I told them? I said, you walk up to them and talk to them. You just go talk to them. So that's what's missing, is that disconnect. The same thing that y'all were describing, is y'all don't have those guys that grew up in the 70s, 80s, 90s that are my age now, that sold a whole bunch of drugs in Baltimore, because that's one thing I didn't hear say that tore this city apart. Drugs is killing this city. It has killed Baltimore. It has made some of the situations that y'all peers are going through, it has put them in those situations. So we just have to have an honest conversation. I know we don't have time right now, but that's a whole different level of conversation, getting to the root cause of a lot of the problems, and then how do we deal with them going forward? Thank you.
I'm glad you made that comment, because when I was listening to the young people talking about organizing, what's extremely important, I don't want us to turn away from how important direct service is. Like, I mentor. I try to teach my mentees to mentor. I understand how hard it is to make it when you don't have people to teach you about different systems, how to fill out an application, how to buy your first property, job etiquette, food etiquette, family etiquette, how to raise your kid. Like, these are things that a lot of people from my generation, I'm talking about kids born in the 80s, we didn't really have people to show us these things, because once crack came, it wiped out everything. So the only people who were left was our grandmothers, and we had to learn how to be men from them. So if you are part of an organizing community, that's cool. Like, that's do your thing, but don't ignore how important it is to try to give some of the skills that you've learned in your journey, especially if you was able to reach some type of success, whatever that means for you. Don't, you can help and you can share that with other people, because it's powerful and we need it.
Then anybody else want to respond to that?
Me personally, I don't think we should use the phrase bad kids. Like, that's me personally, right? What you described is more so misguided, right? Because to me, like, personally, you don't know me. Like, you see me on a panel and you said everybody in this room is a good kid, right? Like, you said everybody in this room is a good kid.
Go ahead.
All right.
You don't have to ask questions.
But,
because there'll be a fight.
Like,
Go ahead.
I want to use the phrase good kids, and I want to use the phrase bad kids. I say there's misguided kids, and there's kids with, like, privilege or have given opportunities. Like, prior to me doing organizing, I have done other things, yes. But being in environments like Baltimore Algebra Project, meeting my mentor, Jeff Brown, like, people like that mold those misguided kids into, like, productive kids. And I say, like, instead of just be like, hey, we have to also address these bad kids, go out into your community and encourage other people in your community to go, like you were saying, go talk to the bad kids or the misguided kids, because that sparks a lot of change. Like, if it wasn't for, like, the Algebra Project or, like, my mentor, like, I would not be in the position, I would not have the spaces or the opportunities I had before. So, like, yeah, there is causes, like you were saying, like, we have to address the causes, because if it, like, say I'm a kid selling drugs, I'm not selling drugs because I want to sell drugs or like this is fun to me. Like, I'm selling drugs because most likely I live in poverty. I have my parents don't make enough to provide for me or whoever else. So in my eyes, I have to do what I gotta do to make ends meet and to live how I gotta live. Like, that's to me is the difference.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was just thinking of a possible solution to this issue. I was thinking, so I believe that it's extremely important for the community, all of these organizations to expose to these kids other routes that they can take. So to give these kids who feel lost or who are misguided, who feel like they weren't raised or they don't have their parents to raise them the correct way, to expose them to these mentors and to expose them to these programs, just to make them feel like I can do something with my life, when I'm lost or when I feel helpless or anything. So I think just exposure to these sources is extremely important.
Okay, yeah. Can you contribute there a little bit?
Oh, you got hold of this right. Yeah, hi, I'm Stephen Jansen. I'm a reporter for the Real News. But one thing that that is important to mention in this context of this conversation is the tremendous economic incentives that come with policing in this city. There's a great reporter here, Justine, who we know a guy who became famous, talking about corrupt Baltimore police, but he also was someone who was able to leave the police department in his mid-30s and make 2/3 of his salary for the rest of his life. That's kind of like having $3 or $4 million in the bank. I mean, the city police department spends $50 million in overtime every year. They are incentivized to create criminality. And until that economic structure is changed, absolutely nothing will change in this city. I guarantee you, if you have a $1 billion pension fund sitting there, that the city contributes 4 times more every year than they do to recreation centers, nothing will change. Nothing. Just want to say that.
Okay. I just want to add a little more to this because and I hear you. I grew up before that drug, coke, crack cocaine, the rest of that kind of stuff was happening. And I was an organizer in the city. And one of the things that I noticed that a lot of people organized to stop those drugs from coming in. And those people, not the drug dealers, were locked up by the police. Open air drug markets were protected by the police. Majors and high officials in the police department was running a lot of those drugs that end up polluting our city. Now, one of the things that we have to recognize is we didn't bring cocaine here, we didn't bring crack here, and we certainly didn't bring that avalanche of guns here. But they were allowed to come and they were allowed to impact this city. But the one thing that we do know, and we have to keep in mind, and it's not just about gentrification, but there's certain areas of the city that there's no crime allowed at all. If you walk through that area in 3s or 4, you're gonna be accosted, you're gonna be locked up, or you're gonna be ran out of that neighborhood. And in other areas, you're being policed like you're in occupied territory and anything goes. That's deliberate. Those things are deliberate. And the results of that, and just bear with me for a minute because I've kind of like lived through this myself. The policing of those areas, the black butterfly, has resulted in a population of young black men and women in prisons in Cumberland, in Hagerstown, in Somerset, and those young black prisoners, for all too many cases, have been abused by young white guards. And they suffer that abuse, and then they come back into the community, and they're angry, and they're frustrated, and they're mad. They know they committed a crime, they got locked up, or maybe they got set up or whatever, but then when they got there, they got abused. And nobody said anything. Nobody reached out. Nobody tried to correct that. And they come back into the community, and in the community, now they're saying, you have no right to say anything to me at all. I'm gonna do whatever I need to do to live and survive. So we have to consider all that when we consider that behavior, and we have to realize that we play a part in that by being silent, by letting things go on behind those walls and not saying anything, because out of sight is out of mind, or we either don't want to be targeted ourselves. So there's a lot of factors. It's very complex. Nobody, and I'll tell you, I work down in Gilmore Home, nobody want to risk their life for $600 a week. You could work at McDonald's. Nobody wants to be shot in the back of their head for $600 a week. But that's what these young people are being forced to face. And we need to figure out how to make City Hall put some of that police money and some of that development TIF money into our youth and save them before they get there.
Hello, everyone. My name is Stephen Merrick. I'm a youth organizer here in Baltimore City with Communities United. And I'd just like to start by saying that our youth are the future of not only the city, the state, but this nation and this world. And our youth spend about 6.5 hours a day in school, about 180 days a year, while their parents work 8 to 10 hours a day. Hopefully they have both parents in the household. Maybe mom's working 8, 10 to 12 hours a day. And so my brother at the end spoke about the difference between the misguided kids and the kids that may have had different opportunities, but they're both in the same school, right? So there's a study done by, I believe, the Maryland Center for Economic Policy on the Baltimore City budget, which states that for every dollar spent on the Baltimore City Police Department, there's 51 cents spent on Baltimore City Public Schools, 15 on the Department of Housing and Community Development, 13 cents on the Office of Human Resources, 6 cents on the Office of Employment and Development, and 1 cent, 1 penny, on substance use disorder, mental health within the health department. And so if the youth that are misguided and the youth that have the opportunities are in the same schools, when they leave, we talked about we can't just blame the parents for everything for the issues that the children are going through, right? But if you're only spending 1 cent on mental health, on the health department, and our parents who are working 8 to 10 hours a day, maybe single moms, they may need resources from our health department. They may have mental health issues. So how do you expect them to be able to deal with the children that are having problems that they are away from 6 to 8 hours a day, right? And so our youth are having issues coming from all different directions, problems maybe in the household, within the schools, right? But what's the difference between the misguided students and the students that have the opportunities? Where's the disconnect happening, right? And I guess that's my question to the panel, and whoever wants to answer can answer.
Anybody want to answer that? Did you get the question?
I was going to ask if you can repeat the question.
Okay, the question in short
I'm sorry,
was,
I may have been all over the place.
Yeah, you did, but it's okay.
So
the question
is,
okay, go ahead.
Where is the disconnect between the students that have the misguided students or the misguided children and the children that have these opportunities? If they are going to the same schools, but I guess outside of the schools, they may have different environments. But what might be the disconnect between the two?
Oh, let him. You want to answer it first? Yeah. No. Okay. Go ahead. Whoever want to answer. You want to answer?
Oh, I can be quick. To sustain capitalism, you need a certain amount of people to fail. That's one way.
Wait, can I answer the question as well?
Go ahead.
Another thing is it's like your hierarchy of needs, right? Like in school, if this student that has all the opportunities, all like their resources available to them, like they're not gonna have this idea, like they get beyond it. But like if I'm the misguided child, like I don't eat at home, like before I got to school, I just hit the block. Like when I get to school, I'm not gonna be worried about like, damn, I ain't do my math homework. It'll be like, all right, when I get out of school, am I gonna eat? Man, it's about 10:30. I just got here. When's lunch? Like all your other train of thoughts is not gonna be on your academics. Like it's gonna be all over the place. And like that's one of the things like the Algebra Project and one of my student supports I had last year, Miss B, she explained to me because like she pulled me aside one day and she was like she just asked me like, what's up with your grades? Like you're in school every day. You might miss a couple days, but your grade's not there. Like you're in class, so what's the issue? Like we had that conversation and she had just explained like your hierarchy of needs is not up to par. If you got all these other variables going on beside you, when you get in the building, it's not gonna be, all right, these issues is pushed away, let me go back to school. These issues are still a factor in my life while I'm in school. Like there's a lot of kids that don't eat at home, so they gotta rely on like the school breakfast, school lunch. There's a lot of kids that don't work, so they gotta hold on to every penny, every dollar. Like the school bus pass, if you lose your school bus pass, that's $5. I don't have $5. I'm not paying for a picture with my face on it. So I'm gonna keep going to the main office like, can I get a green pass? If I can't get a green pass, now my next train of thought is how I'm gonna get home. So like those variables also affect your academic life.
So check this out. What if you got all them problems at home and then you make it to school and you want to do the work and then a ceiling fall on your head?
I'm going back home. I'm going back home. If the ceiling falls on my head, I'm going back home.
Or it's
and
2
I'm
degrees,
sewing.
or it's 2 degrees and they got you reading the Crucible.
Yeah, I'm not paying attention. I'm cold. Like most likely, I don't got a coat. I got this thin little jacket on. I'm leaving. Like I'm going back home. Then I'm just assed out. Like that's literally what it is. Like I'm not even trying to be funny. Like that literally at that point, that person is assed out, and there's nothing the school can do for me. There's nothing home can do for me, and like I don't have resources.
All right. Okay. Next question.
Hi, everyone. My name is Larry Holman, and I'm director and founder of Metro Voice Youth Entrepreneur Program. And Metro Voice is a leadership personal development program. And I'd like to answer the question in terms of the fact that we don't ask the right questions. See, the real question we should be asking is, what is our philosophy in these areas? What is our attitudes? Again, if you want to take total responsibility, then you have to look on the inside. Everything that I've heard tonight, it's been, I would say, the outside. And if you want to remember one thing I said tonight, is that there only can be one, but there's always two. See, there's a choice. You always got to make a choice, you see. So we pay a lot of attention to the things on the outside, but we don't pay enough attention of the things on the inside. And I guarantee you, if we stand around in a circle and propose where the secret stands in the center and knows, it's silent, we need to know. We need to reflect our studies and our attention on the inside. That will solve all the problems on the outside. Everything on the outside you're talking about is created from the inside. These other people, they don't know either. They just on the same level you are. They are following the same system, structure, and mess that you are. Now, I have a formula here. It says E plus R equal O. That means the event plus your response equal the output. So regardless what anybody outside do, it's really up to what you do. See, because the other side gonna always do what they do because they got an agenda. And what they want you to do is chase behind them, saying, don't do this. But while you're doing that, you're not focused on what you need to do.
First of all, I just want to thank you, Dee, Elijah, Kathy, and Ivan for showing up and talking to us and standing in your truth. This is a good conversation. Now, my question to anyone on the panel, do you foresee yourself or foresee this being an ongoing thing, considering there's such a disconnect between the generations? Because there's things that's coming out that people in my age group may not be aware of or not paying attention to or don't want to take in their spirit. So I feel that this needs to be an ongoing conversation so we can start unpacking some more things.
Anybody want to answer that?
I was having this same exact conversation my freshman year in high school when I was beginning to organize. I'm 100% sure that by the time I'm a senior in college, I'll be having the same exact conversation. I'm 100% sure that by the time I'm in my late 30s, I'm going to be having the same exact conversation again. I think a lot of this, and for me, that's why I was saying earlier to the young lady who asked the question about solutions. At the beginning, it was so frustrating that I was repeating and repeating the same exact things, and I was not seeing any change. So over time, you have to start thinking about how, one, we are always making an advancement, however slight it might be, if we are constantly talking about the issues that we stand truth to, and that we stand witness to. So I also think that's why I'm so heavy on organizing too, is because I think, like I said to the young lady earlier, there's no way that we're gonna do one massive jump from today to tomorrow and solve all of the years and years history worth of abuse and oppression and white supremacy that has constantly put under their foot people of color. And so I think having these conversations a lot is about making sure that the room is constantly growing, making sure that the room is seeing new faces, making sure that the spaces that we tell these things to is constantly evolving. I was actually thinking that when I first walked in, and I was like, man, it's good. It feels good when you see people you know. When I see Zeke, I'm like, okay, I'm a lot calmer now because I see someone I know. Seeing Wayne, seeing people that I know makes me feel good, but it also makes me feel good all of the faces in here that I don't know yet. And so hopefully over time, we'll be in the same spaces again, but also there will be new faces in those spaces. And so I don't think it's about necessarily will we have to have these conversations again, because the answer is yes. As frustrating as it might be for centuries on, we'll still be having these conversations. I think it's about the small advancements that we make so that the focus of the conversation slowly starts shifting, and then also the new faces that are coming across the kind of knowledge that people who have maybe been standing at the front of the organizing or the direct actions, or even fallen constantly victims to this system are speaking to. And so how often are we spreading that kind of knowledge to new people?
Okay, one last question down here. The lady in the pink by the pole.
Sorry, I promised to try to go next.
We're gonna run out of time. Go ahead.
So my heart is racing because there's just so many thoughts going through my mind. But I wanted to backtrack on the young lady's question over here in the corner and the young man's question over here, the two questions. So she was asking about the generational gap, about how to bridge the gap and how we can deal with those issues between the older generation and the younger generation. And I think it is as simple as the young man said up there. It's just, someone said it before here. It's really as simple as starting to engage. We don't really have to talk too much about it. I think it's more so a thing of us taking action at this point and engaging our young people. We have to bridge the gap. There is no option. We have to bridge the gap because that is what caused us, our generation, to be able to be educated and supported. Our young people have to feel supported, period and flat out. All of our city officials, everyone in charge of education, writing the checks, signing the checks, invest in our young people. If you do not do it, we will regret it, all of us. There is no boundaries, there's no bridges, there's no lines you can draw to keep young people away or to keep them out of anything because they are the future. So if we don't invest in them now, we will regret it later. So I wanted to also speak on your question about the difference between the misguided young people and the ones that are not considered misguided because of their economic differences. I've been an advocate in the juvenile services since 2001. I've been working in and out of schools, juvenile jail system, detention centers. I see how the staff also treats certain young people who are from certain economic situations. So sometimes the staff at the schools treat the students different. Their language, the way they engage them, the way they speak to them. Sometimes it's just a demeanor, that they have towards those particular students that they know are struggling or maybe coming from homes that are lacking food, lacking money, certain situations. A lot of times those students are targeted, even in school. They're told to sit to the back of the class, or they're told they're not, engaged as much as other students who may not look like them or may not have what they have. So it's a lot of engagement that has to take place. And I think even when the parents aren't there or the parents aren't able, we need more volunteers in the schools to go inside the schools and engage and be advocates for our students and our young people. So that's what I'm saying.
Okay, thank you. We're wrapping this up. It's only 20 after 8, but we're gonna take a few minutes. Okay, we're gonna make allowances for one last. Because I don't think I would have got out of here if he didn't get to answer his question. Go ahead.
First of all, a kid is a baby goat.
We can't hear you.
First of all, a kid is a baby goat. Okay, I would never consider y'all kids because you're not. It's like this here. There's no generation gap. All this is a policy. It's a policy. How would I say?
Do it. Just go
Okay,
ahead. Go
it's
ahead.
like this here. We are suffering from the same thing, oppression by your local government. Your government is pretty much creating the conditions that you live in to make you fail. Simple fact. Get rid of the source that gives you the misery, and you can actually change your way of life. The government is pretty much the focus on everything that's happening in Baltimore City. We know it's corrupt. It needs to be changed. So this is the system that created the bad times for you. So like I said, there's no generation gap. We all living through the same depression situations. Baltimore City government is corrupt, and it got to be changed.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. Look, on this last few minutes, if you will, do you have some suggestions of what we might talk about? We're going to be back here in 2 weeks. And so if you, Taya, where are you? Right there. If you have suggestions, can you come over to Taya and share those suggestions with us? Anybody that has suggestions or what we need to look at or talk about in the next 2 weeks when we come back here. Okay, there you are. What's your suggestion? Let's hear it.
Okay. Historical trauma. There needs to be a panel. I've been saying this for a long time on historical trauma, because if we don't learn there were slaves that were docked at the harbor. We need to talk about that so we cannot repeat the same stuff.
Okay.
The corruption in the nonprofit sector and cultural philanthropy.
Okay, I heard that. Next.
Hey, I'd like one about how the media keeps lying.
I don't know if we're gonna do that. But yeah, okay. Anybody else?
Anyone else have any suggestions on stories they'd like us to cover or look into or investigate?
Okay, well, will you give the panel? Oh, wait a minute. There was one.
Oh, and two.
I really would like somebody to investigate some funding in Northwest Baltimore. I can get some details though.
Okay.
The intolerance of Black and brown students in the public school system. I think that we have an intolerance with Black and brown students, but a tolerance for white students in terms of like behavior patterns, like what's acceptable in white communities. Like having a temper tantrum requires for Black students to have police officers present and get them arrested. So like that kind of conversation.
Okay. All right. Okay, so
I promise.
Just one more? Okay, go ahead.
The barbaric attitude of Federal Hill residents after all Ravens and Orioles games.
Okay, all right, okay. All right, okay, so I would like you to, especially the young people, they did an excellent job. Give the panel a round of applause, please. And thank you all for coming, and please come back in 2 weeks. We're gonna continue this discussion and continue this to allow people to have input into what's going on. We televise it so you can go to our site and you can see it. And last but not least, remember, we're making space available to anybody, young people, old people that wanna organize. Okay, bye.